for illumined life to be birthed into form. I am the truth. I am the light. Illumined, beloved divine.
So hello there everyone, and welcome to this video update with me. This will be quite an interesting and intense update, and I want to take you again on a journey of goddess liberation and what that is. Firstly, I want to speak a few words because I will share a journey that I recently had to go through in one of my meditations to meet another aspect that goddess wanted to uplift, liberate, and resurrect. And I want to talk about the essence of Aurea, and again, Aureus, which is, I've recently made this spirit drawing to represent the way this sacred orchestration of light comes through as Aurea descending through the pillar, and Aureus as an oversoul aspect of liberation, and all of us being her aspects, holding that space and performing the sort of sacred positioning or geometrics that make this possible to translate the currents of life force to liberate the specific patterns of light. So Aurea is the goddess of liberation, and goddess in herself is this presented through some of the archetypal work, which are 64 signets of life or signatures of life, known as the aspects of the goddess. And Aurea is the goddess of liberation, and I've received this guidance since quite a few years ago, but I didn't know back then how auspicious this journey of liberating these aspects through the physical incarnation and the physical embodiment through the essence of Christ will be. So recently, as you know, we often have our mini sessions also with Jesus the Christ, because I consider him very important for the journey of earth ascension and planting the seeds of Illumined union that he, as the masculine Christ seed in that particular timeline, had to activate, which now the feminine seed is planting at this specific time, which is the seed of the feminine Christ. So Aurea is, in a way, my spirit mother. I am one of her light extensions. And in the work that we do as a group of beings called Aureus, we simply hold the space for Aurea to perform specific liberations, which means if you imagine, the word, we often know this word in our new spiritual circles as, reaching for those soul aspects and pulling them upward. And I had this dream many years ago that I've already shared with you a couple of times, I believe, with this hand of the divine reaching towards aspects that were presented as the rainbow beads. And many of them fell in this muddy gutter, and many came also up into the light. And the goddess said, just these, focus on these at this particular cycle, this particular life cycle. So it's about this liberation, and in many cases we also know this under the word soul retrieval, which is an aspect, but it is not soul liberation in itself. The liberation only occurs through the spirit. So it's the spirit through us holding the space, being within this vessel of embodiment, performing the sacred work. So in a way it's divine, it's godly, but the space held within a physical body, this container that is so important, because we're trying to, as our own mission team, liberate these aspects within the human bodies that have been dormant and asleep and, tempered with for so long, for eons of time. So as a mission team representative for what Aurea is in one aspect of the goddess, which is the goddess of liberation, that's hence the work that we do. And hence I talk about physical ascension in terms, because the goddess of liberation now is performing these sacred rites through those aspects of the soul that have been incarnate for so long and held within the template or structure of the human bodies, to lift them up and to raise them into a new embodiment experience. That's basically in a nutshell the work that we're doing. But today I want to take you through one of the aspects that I had to relive today and re-experience as one of these aspects, which came as a total surprise to me. But a while ago I created also this playlist on YouTube called The Goddess Liberation, and it's the Goddess Liberation work that we do primarily, and then there's the work in the body. So this falls in the lines, and it's perfectly aligned with what I've been sharing about this journey of transgression. So I guess this was in essence a part of an aspect that also was a part of the storyline. You know, in creation, these spirals are like stories, and each of them has its own beginning, and it has the middle where it's like unraveling itself, and it has the intense polarity experience, and then the story is ready to come into completion and back into the state of wholeness. And that's what Aurea does, and that's where she comes in as the goddess or life force of liberation. And when I realized that, simply as a human, I have to hold the space. And Jesus said in one of these recent meditations we did with him that only beings who are of the Christ can actually perform this sacred work on the behalf of the specific storylines that have been actually dormant but playing out behind the scenes in all of our bodies. Because remember, we all shared the same ancestry. We've all were a part of everything that ever happened on earth. But the way light beings come in and perform these missions, we're only able to do so through the essence of Christ, because this essence is completely benevolent, non-judgmental. It does not jump to conclusions. It does not identify with these aspects. So this is not about you. When you experience the storyline as an archetype playing out, you're not associating yourself. You're not saying, wow, this was my incarnation, or was my story. You're simply watching it, and you're holding the space so the spirit of liberation can pull this aspect back once into its state of wholeness, so its story can be complete. And we came to complete many of these stories. You can imagine them like fractals, right? Like fractions. Like if the goddess drops this current of life force and creates her extensions, then once again, when these extensions are ready to be assimilated and kind of like synthesis to occur, then they're ready to once again resurrect back into their state of illumined union. Then these aspects need to liberate first, because there's aspects, the way the energy is channeled through and moving through is an experience from a specific level of density into its new co-creational cycle, in its new state of density, completely new. And there's phases, and I recently shared them in my Patreon video about creating flow. Creating flow is not just about, me being here by the river and watching nature just be and unwind and being in flow, but it's us learning to generate this flow through our own bodies with the assistance of spirit. So it goes much deeper than what we usually consider under these words, but this is very important, and hence the goddess of liberation, or Aurea, has simply been talking about this so much of the late, because it is becoming so important. There's a lot of intensity held now in the polarity in which this field where illumined union is taking place, and we might think, oh, this is so close, it's so close. But remember, it's like a spinal cord, right? It comes apart and then comes back together, and there's several of these aspects, and all of these are part of the one story. And all the beings who ever assisted the liberation of the human bodies and the human template, and for the human beings to once again come back into their godly divine state as they were envisioned through the holy creator and the creators of life, or the holy Elohim, and all these essences of life, and they've supported this process. Then all these beings who once again became a part of the earth story and incarnates here, they're now also ready to be liberated, and we're holding space for this work. So let me go deeper. I want to share this meditative experience I had today. So recently, because we've been doing a lot of work in the body, I've channeled this prayer through which I can access God or divinity or source, prime creator light, directly, right? And it's that direct accessing that through prayer, it's the most direct. Prayer is still one of the holiest acts, because it surrenders all of the capacity of the human wiring and mind and thinking how we're going to heal that, or liberate from that. Eventually you create a certain work and you get to a certain point, and then you need to totally let it go. And this is where prayer is the sacred act of total surrender, right? And so I've channeled this prayer, and I've been invoking this prayer, and then I've been doing like a sound attainment through first godly sound that we know, which is the great Aum, right? And through this Om, I was suddenly, as I was probably repeating it for about 13 times, which is the sacred goddess number, I was taking all of a sudden to this space, which is when I thought, well, I'm going to have my usual meditation, and that's it. When we're doing this light body synthesis work now and repairing these distorted aspects in the body. But all healing is spiral. So a part of these healings is sometimes you occur, or something occurs, and you're observing that occurrence, and it's totally non-controlled. Like, I couldn't have controlled that if I wanted to, because I thought I'm just going to have my regular meditation. So what happened, I was taken into this space, which I first thought, well, this is the temple of God and this is a part of my healing. So I saw like the sacred pool of pure liquid light, and I was asked to step near this pool and be bathed in this light. So I took my white garment off and, like, you know, being naked, and I watched myself slowly dip into this water pool. First my toes, then my calves, my entire legs, and then the torso, and then I was all engulfed in it. Like, I really sunk into it, which I now interpret as I was literally in this godly pool, because I couldn't have initiated this in any other way but through purity, because first I enacted this prayer, and then with the sacred sound of Om. There wasn't any distortion, there wasn't any filtering, it was pure. But all of a sudden, when I entered out of this feeling of being etheric, this pool felt more real. It felt like it's literally gold. And then I stepped out of it, I felt like I have this coating on me, and it was more of a feeling kind of meditation, but also, you know, visual. It was also visual. So then I stepped almost like on this red carpet. I was walking towards the temple, which also now wasn't just the etheric feeling of a divine sacred space being held, but it was a literal temple, and all was gold and shiny. And it's interesting, I'll tell you later which card I pulled just the day before, and the card was called False God, and the card, the face on it was gold, and it looked like a mask is covering it, right? So it made total sense after the meditation, but let me go deeper. So I was walking in this red carpet line, right? So it was me, but it wasn't me at the same time. I was just witnessing this aspect, right, through Aurea, through Source also, because that was the initiation that came through suddenly and unexpectedly. It was an aspect that I suddenly jumped into this timeline, ready to do the work, right? It was like, it's the way the Christ being served. It's unconditionally, and that means sometimes you're going to be taken spontaneously into a journey that you're going to have absolute no control over. So I'm walking the red carpet, and it was really slowly, you know, it was almost like ritualistically. And then I entered this temple. I'm being told, like, just look at this being, look at this God, right? And I'm okay, just look at him, like visualize him, see him, right? When you're coming closer to him. And it was all just a feeling of everything being in gold. And then I see this being was like a man, masculine, but it was covered in this like sheath of energy, and was like a armor, right? It was armor of gold. He was all encased in that. And then he welcomed me, and he said, well, welcome, you know, how was it? How was your journey? And it was a feeling like the pool was a transition space, and I was on earth, and now I'm transitioning through this pool, and literally I bathed in gold, like physically in gold. And then I said, well, who are you? And he said, well, I'm Anu. And it was instantly knowing of Anunnaki, right? And it was their temple, which I now then interpreted in my awoke state that it was almost like it was their physical ship, right? It was that their domain above, or abode above the earth. And if you wanted to then pass on to, you know, into the ship, you had to bathe in gold. That's what I saw, you know, to make the transition, because they kept visiting, you know, the earth and having their stations. And I don't know everything, but I know a lot about these beings because I studied a lot their cultures and their ways. So I'm looking at this being, and all of a sudden he was reading my energy, and my energy was like full of compassion, and I was looking like back. I was attached to something there on earth, and he could read that. And he said, so now we know, so you actually like them. And I'm still silent. And then he said, whoa, you don't just like them, you like a specific one of them too. And of course it was referring to earth humans and their earth bodies, and just falling in love with the beautiful beings that earthlings were created to be. And it was all under direct domain of Source, of Prime Creator. They weren't just a creation of specific ET beings that just wanted to create their offspring. The way human being was designed was so perfect. And the Holy Elohim, and, you know, the Trinity of Life, and all these principles I don't want to even go into now. So I'm still looking at this being. And then he said something, well, there was a feeling of resentment, and he said something like that I'll now be exiled to be with them, right? So I gave him my code of like the sheath, or like I was surrendering my armor, and he just said, well, but don't think it's over. He said something like, we will still monitor and visit you all the time, and we will experiment. And so it was almost like creating this kind of curse or a spell over this being. So I go back, I jumped into this pool, but it was suddenly like a pool of water, and I was swimming, and I was like drowning in it. And then all of a sudden I was being pulled by this light, like upward, right? And I asked, well, who was I before this? And this light just takes me upward, and I see just nothing but the spinning galaxy. I was like, oh, I was a light being, I was a galactic being. And then I'm pulled further and further, and it felt like this white current of light. I was like ascending through this spiral into this current of life, following it, and then I saw and met this being. And I was like, wow, like, who are you? And she said, well, I'm your mother, you are me. You are of me. You're created through me. And it was actually Aurea. It's like this mother of resurrection and liberation. And I asked, well, who am I in this aspect? And she said, Inanna. And I was really surprised also as a witness, witnessing this. And all of a sudden, it wasn't anything verbal, but I had this feeling of knowing just her story. I don't know everything about Inanna and her journey, but I know there's a lot of this repressed feminine. You know, Inanna was like also considered to be one of the first women who also rebelled in a way, and she wanted to be, I don't know, but it was this whole story. You can study it online, but I'm trying to say here, this was a direct experience when I entered into this archetypal lifetime. And it's not about, oh, but this is true about, or this is what it says here. Forget about the words in the scriptures. You know, often what we translate and has been translated through eons of time, it can be misperceived. So what I was shown is that there's always been initiative of the goddess through all of these lifetimes that were very distorted, and you know, these fallen gods creating these experiments with humans and trying to study humans, and in a way wanting to be like them, but not being able. So I also got this sense of they're needing to harness gold, because you know, they were digging gold. You know, the Great Lakes in United States are part of that gold digging, and there's a lot of other stories, right? They were harnessing this gold to be able to maintain themselves in the orbit, but also to maintain themselves as partially physical, to resonate with a specific frequency. And because we all were part of that, it was in the human design. Everything that ever took place on Earth, every experiment, every being landing here, depositing their repository of knowledge and experience here on Earth, it's all a part of us. So we kept on reliving these aspects. So we saw, and we often were told, Inanna is this fallen goddess, but in truth, what the goddess truly showed me is she was also one of the beings of the mission service who infiltrated these darker timelines and being with these darker beings who are controlling beings, right? And you know, there's also other stories of other Anunnaki who actually had love for the humans, who wanted to be with humans and take care of them, but they were also always the opposing parties or those of opposition, and they didn't like humans, and they saw them as less than, right? They saw them as these creatures that they need to harness and use for their own purposes, right? And at the same time, they wanted to study them. So I don't get the whole picture, but I was then seeing how Inanna's, there's a story connected with Venus, right? Inanna's descent into the underworld. But what I was seeing was more like she had to become then a part of the human realm and offering herself and her body because she had love and compassion. So she was also sacrificed in a way through a higher aspect. But there's then a story of her body being mutilated, I think, and her sister, was it Erishkigal, I think, who then performed something on her. You know, it's like there's a lot of evil there in those stories, but a lot of it was truth. You know, it was later interpreted in different meanings, but we have to go into the archetypal, right? So she literally sacrificed her body to assist the human realm, because she also had love and compassion. She had love for the human, and she understood the beauty of these human bodies and wanting to be a part of that liberation. But during that process, her own body became mistreated and abused. Yeah, so it was like, remember a while ago we were healing that, and recently that was in my synthesis video on Patreon about the Luciferian wound, literally Lucifera's wound. And now I was shown, this is like, the goddess has told me Lucifera in Inanna and all of these stories, all of these aspects that always aimed towards liberation of the human bodies, had love for the humankind, and the creation that went behind it, and it is a part of that, and it's all connected. So it was showing me like simultaneously, and then it was said, well, we're doing the Inanna wound now, and then I just saw her aspect being lifted up and raised back into the light of the goddess, meeting up her maker and herself in a way as also being liberated. And that's how Aurea, as the goddess of liberation, works. She's like helping these aspects to be released and to be liberated so they can resurrect and continue this aspect that's still dormant, that still entrapped. But as it's entrapped, it influences our collective human psyche. So the work that we do here now is these liberation forces is so deeply healing for the collective. So one body chooses to be a part of the sacrifice for the whole. And that's what most people don't understand, how the Christ operates through these bodies that are a part of these missions. It's very deep, it's very intense. You don't know what you're going to get. So each time it's something new, but these aspects, as Aurea shows me, they all need to be liberated. So we're actually working around in circles. It's like a spiral, right? It feels like it's a circle and it's like spinning and you're not getting anywhere, but it's actually taking place. And each circle completes itself. You're up on a new level, and then the spiral unwinds again and again. So that's how this ascension is truly happening. So this was so interesting. In the moment I got out of this meditative space, I was like, I can't believe this. I'm like, creation is so complex. What the heck? You know, as a human, I sometimes get overwhelmed by this. And then we had to do the meditation with beloved Jesus. And he was also showing us that this is the truth. And only Christ beings actually volunteer for these missions, because we work as a Christ collective. And we each have our own narratives of speciality and uniqueness, how we best perform this. And I don't even know as a human how this takes place. It just does. And sometimes just witnessing this assists. And so this is what Aurea said to me today. Just witnessing this and helping this archetype to be liberated through the body. So when you're re-experiencing this in the body, you're actually releasing it physically from the cells of the body that still hold this memory. And people who are not conscious, it's still within them, because it is a part of the human collective. But once it becomes consciously alive and pulsating again, it's remembering its story, then it can be liberated. And it can only be done through the body of the Christ, which is the bigger body that we as light beings belong to. And that's how the Christ mission of liberation works. And there's many aspects of Christ's mission, but we are specifically, my team, who I am, what we do is performing this work of liberation. So I wanted to share this with you to really have like a bigger picture of what goddess liberation is, and that it's bigger than just this body and our story. And when you're experiencing something like that, it doesn't mean, oh, was this my lifetime? Did I live through this? No, probably not. But it is holding the space in the body. Remember, at the same time, we are all lifetimes, right? Because we are all one body of Christ. So when one body being alive now, because this is the embodiment now, I'm alive now, I'm breathing, I'm here, I'm the Christ embodiment, I have the opportunity to do this. So it moves through me because I'm now available. I made myself available. I'm the one doing this. And the same goes for many beings now who are volunteering in similar matters in their own way. So the reason why I'm sharing this, because there's a lot of galactic beings here now performing similar work, and they may not have the idea when something like that happens. And many beings, especially starseeds, are still very attached to those being like lifelines, their stories, what they're living. But try to see everything as a part of a bigger story that's now trying to complete itself. And these aspects that were mutilated, that were tortured, abused, experimented on, right? That's a part of the transgression work. That we're not allowed to live in happy unions, like when someone fell in love and wanted to experience that aspect in a physical sense, and they were not allowed. I also had one dream many years ago like that, when I was in the body of a woman really in love with this earthly man, but there was this temple and they wanted to keep me stuck in this temple, and they were choosing someone for me. And I'm like, no. And there was this being like a major priestess, but it was like a witch kind of priestess. She was not of the light. And she was performing like this. She wanted to perform this magic in me and my back. And she was trying to influence my lower back and my sexual chakras and to entice me. And I was like pulling away and was running away. And I remember these like reliving those aspects. And many of these things is helping this to release these aspects into the life of being free again. At the same time, this is difficult for our inner child, which is the first seated aspect that we are as a human. It's the inner child. It's the first godly creation. And this aspect is so pure. All it wants to do is be happy and live in love and joy. And this is what my prayer is about when I invoke the prayer. And I'll share it on Patreon because it's really beautiful, pure prayer. And this human child just really wants to be free again. But as a part of this freedom, we have to go the whole cycle around so we can actually get to that. And it's difficult for this inner child because he doesn't, or he or she, or it, I don't want to call it it though, it doesn't sound right. He or she literally just really wants to have that full earth experience, that full-blown divinity in the human flesh. It wants to bring that love to the human, and spirit, love, wants to bring that to the human. But it's often difficult because the road of pure intentions is paved with a lot of things that have been and are still playing out in the collective psyche and the body, even though it might be considered as dormant, but it's absolutely real, even if dormant. So it's coming up to the surface to be liberated, fully released, as like the dove, I said we're releasing, and then surrender to spirit. And this is where we don't have to engage the mind and start overthinking about this process. We simply say, I trust you, spirit. I've been the witness, I've been the vessel, you do the rest. I trust you, I absolutely trust you and the process. And in the meantime, still bringing the love back to the inner child, because the inner child, my specific inner child, has sacrificed a lot for me to do the spirit work. And it's often sad and depleted, and you're just saying, Mother, why are you allowing this to happen? I just want to live, I want to be just human. Because I recently had a lot of these healing, we did this prayer work, healing meditations, because eventually with certain aspects of healing, nothing else but prayer works, nothing. Because like I said, you as a human are paving these steps to get to a certain maximum potential, but then you need to release that to spirit, because then you're just holding on and you don't know how to do that. We're often saying, we're healers, we know how to heal. The real healer is a divine healer. You know, when I do these sessions on people, I've done a few physical ones now that my journey changed, and every person was like, what the heck just happened? What did you do? And I'm saying, nothing. I did nothing. I'm just channeling the Christ. It's all Christ through me. I'm not identifying with being a healer or me doing the healing. That's the difference of a true healer, a missionary of the Christ, or someone who's like saying, I'm a healer and I'll tell you this about you and this and that, which is just basically putting a lot of things into you, and seeds, like throwing seeds into you. You don't want that. You don't want anyone to ever do that, because you want to get to your own seed. That's what the Christ does. And that's the absolute purity and beauty of this love. And yes, the inner child feels like it's stressed at this moment. I really feel my inner child is very stressed. And it's very much like, just let this be over with once and for good, so I can just like enjoy a little of this life too. It can't all be this and this work and sacrifice. And it's a lot that the mother asked this child to be and hold space for. And I know, and I've been crying a lot to release that and just trusting and surrendering anyway. But this is a part of the bigger process, because it's not just about one human child to be happy. It's about the freedom and liberation that goes into the making of all of the human bodies, and all who choose to go this path of the cosmic Christ becoming embodied through us. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this sharing. If you want to go deeper, all of my updates, as always, are shared on Patreon. My page is called Illumined Ascension, and all the links are on YouTube. And if you ever want to support the work, the great work, you can use the direct pay me link on PayPal. It's also shared here on YouTube. And for the rest, I will see you in another update. And as always, so much love is in power. Mwah. Blessings to all of you, beautiful beloveds. Bye for now.
Magical.